Effectively securing your organization and its reputation requires a smarter approach. To maximize efficiency and minimize risk, security experts turn to LogRhythm, the only leading solution built solely for security teams by a security team committed to your success. With next-gen SIEM, user and entity behavior analytics, network traffic and behavior analysis, security automation and orchestration, and compliance, LogRhythm provides security made smarter. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. The biggest problem in security that remains unsolved is unprotected attack paths that allow threats to compromise vulnerable targets in the cloud and data center. But traditional microsegmentation is too complex and time-consuming. There's a better approach. Edgewise Zero Trust Auto Segmentation. Edgewise is impossibly simple microsegmentation, delivering results immediately with a security outcome that's provable and management that's zero touch. Driven by machine learning, Edgewise automatically builds policies that protect any application in any cloud without any changes to your network. They provide measurable improvement by quantifying attack path risk reduction and verifying software identity before it communicates to stop application compromises and data breaches. To see how to eliminate your network attack surface, visit securityweekly.com/Edgewise. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Quick announcement on our webcasts. We have ones coming up with ServiceNow, Great Horn, and Core Security. ServiceNow, a lot of us obviously have ServiceNow in the enterprise. They've got like great security products. Great Horn, in speaking with Kevin O'Brien from Great Horn, he has been in the Boston hacking scene for some time, which won't surprise you, like was an at-stake kind of, was an at-stake member back in the day. And I've had the opportunity to talk with Kevin actually quite a bit in the past few weeks. And his take and their take on protections against email phishing, the more I listen to it, the more I'm just like, why isn't everyone like running this, right? That's what we like to hear from our sponsors. Like, when they talk about what they do, like, we want that as well. Now, HelpNet Systems, which is Core Security, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the relationship they've had with Security Weekly over the years is just amazing, right? I mean, they were literally sponsor number one. Like, they bought the beer for episode 1 of this show, and have, changed hands and come full circle to be a sponsor on this show. So, super excited about the webcast coming up. Go to securityweekly.com, select the webcast drop-down menu, and register today. I am really, some weeks on the news on various shows, I have to really dig for stories.
Yeah.
In some weeks, the stories that I select, I'm just like, what was the Peter quote from Family Guy? Really grinds my gears. Like
Lindsay Lohan.
Lindsay Lohan. Like, this is like a Lindsay Lohan kind of week for me with stories too. Like, there's so many stories that just really grind my gears. Yep. And I know I'm going to get email, people agreeing, disagreeing, but I have some pretty sharp viewpoints.
And I will personally apologize. I did not add any stories to the wiki this week.
I think that you're going to be able to weigh in on
knowing that I'm going to be able to weigh in on a bunch of yours. And the thing was, for a guy that wasn't on billable work, what the fuck? I was busy as all get out this week.
Yeah.
and between work and family and other extracurricular family activities and dealing with my mom's estate and
right.
I was on the flight to Singapore, and the septic system backed up into our first floor bathroom.
It's life happens.
Life fucking happens.
I had a couple of those days recently.
Hey, Larry, that sounds like middle age.
Of course, Mr. Joff Thayer is still here with us, and my
shit
first
backing up.
I think my first 3 stories really kind of segue nicely into each other, and the first one, certainly Larry and Joff will relate to, right?
Yeah. And I get a couple of other yours that I want to make sure we hit too.
Oh, absolutely. So this first story is basically presented a survey and again, all of our listeners know,
Yeah. You
right?
can turn a
Regular
survey
listeners, surveys, how we'd like to analyze them and sometimes trash them, but pick out the good bits. So this survey, who is responsible for Active Directory security within your organization?
Wait, you can secure Active Directory?
They didn't say that, Larry. They said who is responsible for Active Directory security. Now, to your point, Larry, security should have been maybe air quotes.
Yep.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a lot of stats in this particular survey. But the one that I plucked out is that 24% said that they don't know who is responsible for Active Directory security within the organization.
I think we also need to temper that with, depending on the organization, who they asked might come to play there. So
it's a great point, Larry. How they asked the question and who
they asked.
They
like
asked
if you walk into an IT department and you ask the person at the front desk, "Hey, who's responsible for Active Directory security?"
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I think to add to that, it's a very general question,
I
right?
agree.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an Active Directory security czar? To the honest answer in a lot of organization is, yeah, there probably is. It's a whole group of people.
Yeah, and
right?
it's a great point too, Joff, on your part as well. There was a stat in here. I want to say, I'm not sure which question, but 17% of the organization said they have a person that they can point to that is their Active Directory security person. Of course, that leaves a pretty large percentage that can't point to an Active Directory security person. Now, I'm not going to pick on that stat. I'm really not, because I truly believe that the security folks, like those of us hosts on the show, many of us listening, right? We've participated in the operations of an organization in the security capacity, largely because we had to, right? Because the folks that were doing the administration of it were just overwhelmed with what they had.
Yep.
And there no knock on them whatsoever,
None.
right? But as the security folks, I think largely, Larry in previous jobs and Joff and myself, we've, in just these three examples, had to step in and go, we'll help you with the operations, right?
Yep.
We'll be hands to keyboards helping you with security.
Yep.
We'll go learn whatever we need to learn. We'll apply whatever knowledge we've already learned. Hands to keyboards will help out.
And also with a part of the reason for that is, oh my God, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, there's so many exposures, right? We're like, all right, I'll jump in and help, right?
Yeah.
Where I want us to be as a security community is not the operational aspect of IT, administration, sysadmin, networking, or security, right? We want to be the folks that understand the attack landscape, understand the threat modeling,
and understand the quote the blue side of how to fix said
the red team, the
defend
blue
against
team
attacks.
side, the risk side, the business. There's a lot of aspects we need to understand. Hopefully we've matured to that point in partial where we can help operationalize that, where operationally security professionals don't need to take that hands-on keyboard approach to the operations of IT, right?
And
our hands-on keyboard are modeling, testing, hacking, running simulations, running actual tests on production environments, doing research, doing that threat modeling and making recommendations going in your operations. I need you to take into account this scenario, which could pose great risk to the business. Management goes, yep, I get it. And IT and operations goes, yep, I get it. We'll adjust our processes. And for that condition, we're going to build this into our processes. Then we go on to the next thing and we're like, hey.
Oh, wait, and before you go to the next thing, and we understand that you have some business processes that are built around these essential things that you're doing that we're asking you to change. But if you come up with these other compensating controls, we may have a reasonable level of risk that we can deal with at this point.
I think we're still hands-on keyboard, but not in the everyday operations.
Yes.
That's, to me, like utopia for security. So when we say that like only 17% of us can point to that Active Directory security person, I want to be 0%. I want the Active Directory team, whether that's on-premise or in Azure, to be implementing in their operations those security considerations that were like, yeah, this thing in AD, attackers are going to take advantage of. Make sure we don't have that in our environment. I've tested it. I've modeled it. I've done physical, actual testing of that in our environment. We have this condition. Here's how to fix it. Let's put it in our operations. Cool. We don't have to worry about that. Let's make sure that doesn't come back in the future in our processes. Now I'm going to move on to the next thing.
And I'll take a different tack on that. And Joff, feel free to chime in here. I would argue that there should be at least one person that they can identify as part of the team that is responsible for securing Active Directory, which includes those folks that have hands-on that are interacting with Active Directory day-to-day, that are responsible for user management, that are responsible for Active Directory configuration, those Windows Server admins, as well as the security folks that are doing the advising role, that have delivered these attacks, and those people in business that understand what those changes will mean and can understand what those compensating controls that have been recommended are.
I
think knowing one person on that team you can go to and to say, hey, I need help.
I think great. Moving into the short term, right? The short term is that there's that one advocate for security. I think longer term, everyone on the team understands that and can implement that. And again, I'm living in utopia, right?
Joff.
I don't think you are. I think there are very mature architect-like roles that have a extremely good awareness of security and can act as a bridge entity into operational groups. That even those architect-like roles, and I was in one of those, that they don't necessarily have direct hands-on, but they have an extremely good understanding operationally of what's being achieved, and they will know what the impact of tightening a certain control is going to be, and will know how to appropriately find the right balance. And I don't think you're living in a dreamland. I think there are plenty of organizations that have achieved that level, perhaps not enough of them, but there are certainly organizations that are there.
Yeah, I think it's about having the integrity of the systems, the users, and the data, right? And if you break it down, and Matt Alderman has done a great job of instilling that app user data, right? And I think it's largely preserving the integrity of your app's user data. And going back to our first segment on the show, right? The trust between those applications. If you can preserve the integrity of that, security provides the ways in which we can accomplish that moving forward. The operations team is the execution of that trust, of that integrity of our apps, users, and data moving forward. However, if you're in that 24% that doesn't know who is responsible for the security of Active Directory, we need to talk, right? And I'm not going to call you out. I'm not going to shame you, right? But your Active Directory team should be those who are responsible with the guidance of security, with the buy-in from management in, again, a more utopian society across the board. And to Joff's point, there are some that are there that can say, we need to implement these controls. We need to implement these the integrity of the system such that attackers can't circumvent that, right? Yeah. And that's then built into the operations of it. And this survey really was a good talking point for us to kind of lead people down that path of security shouldn't have that hands-on keyboard, I'm going to go implement this configuration, this fix, this patch for you. It should be just built into your operations moving forward. And that's where largely most of us need to gravitate towards.
Yep, agreed.
I think without a doubt, and also I think you can actually cast a prediction forward into the DevOps world, and we will end up with roles that are considered DevOps architecture, which will have a similar bridge back to information security to actually act as a guiding hand over the DevOps process and make sure that the appropriate security mechanisms are actually integrated there.
And it's a great point, Joff. I have speculated on previous shows on the network that as security, we need to come up with those test cases, right? In a DevOps process, we can't get in there. We don't want to get in the way, certainly. We want to let them push releases out. And part of that pushing new features out and new software out, new patches out, even if we delve into the DevSecOps kind of realm, right, is being able to come up with those test cases, right? And the example that that I use and is being used across the Security Weekly network, right, is I introduced a bug that basically whatever username you entered, your password was valid, right? As a security person, I want to come up with a test scenario to make sure that that particular exposure never ends up in production. Once I do that, my job's not done. I want to, as a security person, go find that next scenario based on research, based on testing, based on all of what I know as a security professional and what I learned moving forward to go, hey, the next one you need to make sure you test for is this. And when I implant that into operations should be efficient enough to make sure that 99.9% of the time, that particular exposure never gets introduced. And once you do that next one, you're not done. You're always moving on to and security's job is to constantly come up with those threat models and go, make sure you're testing for this, right? And that's, I think, the relationship we need to have with the business and the operations.
Yep.
It's so much so that it segues into the next one, which is there was a security vendor, I'm not sure which one it was, but ThreatPost ran with this article with a presentation template that's build your 2020 security plan. Now, they could have the greatest template ever, and I hope they do. I hope it's a really great template, and I haven't reviewed it with any scrutiny right up at this point, right? But when I read it,
we all know we could develop our own.
We could develop our own 2020 security plan, which is it's a very easy presentation. It's just one slide in very big letters that says we're screwed, right? And that's absolutely useless to the business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
But I think where a lot of us are in terms of security, right? And I hope that we can come up with templates that are helping us build next year's security plan. But it was kind of my kind of funny joke about if I were tasked with building a 2020 security plan presentation template, I would start it with one slide that we're screwed.
We're all screwed.
We're all screwed.
We'll start it. I mean, I think that would be the one.
It could start it and end it, right?
Yep.
Let's hope that we progress to the point where it starts it, not ends it with that.
Yeah,
statement.
yeah. I was going to say, you want to start it with, okay, right now perception is we're all screwed, and then lead it up to the point where the last slide can be, maybe we're not as screwed as we thought we were if we take these proactive steps, and summarize your slide deck. I've never been more optimistic, I got to say, because I think the advances that we have got with cloud technology, with application virtualization, with the DevOps pipeline, I think we have more of an opportunity today as security professionals to insert ourselves in the process in a positive and proactive sense than we've ever had before. And so I think it's actually a really exciting time for information security professionals if we handle ourselves in a mature and responsible way, and frankly, remember the Phoenix Project. And that is, we are part of the process. We are part of the business. We should be part of the pipeline. And the interesting thing about today is the technology has directly put us into the pipeline.
Yeah.
And so now we got to put our bigger boy pants on and actually grow to the level where we can actually be a mature part of that pipeline.
And the thing about DevOps, and it's so cliche, right? And I really do look forward to the point in time where we can get Gene Kim back on the show to talk about this, and Patrick Dubois and John Willis. And we're reaching out to these folks for upcoming segments. And if it doesn't happen this year, the folks I want to bring back on to come full circle and be like, look, while we have created this capability in the DevOps process to be able to push out changes and fixes that can help security. Very much a double-edged sword. Again, cliche. We can very quickly introduce security exposures. However, I think the difference is we can fix those in a much shorter amount of time, right? And it comes down to, in the IT sense, right? Not so much with industrial control systems, which is interesting how that doesn't really intersect, right? But ICS aside, if we push out a release that has some type of security vulnerability or exposure, we can live with that for hours, maybe a day, maybe two, right? Before we push out a release that fixes it. In the differences in the ICS world, we can't live with that exposure or any indication or condition that could lead to downtime, because literally we have to keep the lights on, right? Yep. We got to keep the water flowing, the power flowing, in all those things. And that's a unique environment. Put that aside for a moment. In the IT world, when we're pushing out software to end users that are managing their sales process, even doing financial transactions, we can live with a security exposure for, hours, days, right? And push that out. And that delta, I think, is really where the power is. Yes.
We have the agility.
We have the agility. We can push it out, and we can recognize that there's a security vulnerability, and that gets instantly feedback back to a developer that goes, shit, here's a test. We run through a cycle in a very short amount of time. If that passes, we push it out. If it fails, we iterate again. Like less than 24 hours, okay, we have a fix. Translate that, compare that to, rather, the waterfall model where it's months or years before a fix is built in, right? Before it's pushed out, tested.
That really doesn't work anymore.
Right? And obsolete by the time maybe it's pushed out or whatever. And I think that's the difference. So,
well, I think what it results in is that the attack surface has shifted. The attack surface is in the control plane more and more, and less and less about the actual data plane, because the data plane on the application surface itself can be very quickly and in an agile fashion changed. It's still going to have vulnerabilities, but I think you're going to see the control plane emerge as the primary attack point.
Well, and in the control plane, it's interesting, Joff, that you bring that up, because I think it talks about trust between applications and users, right?
Yeah.
And that's the control plane aspect. I think we compound that problem with actual vulnerabilities in the application itself. And those are two different things. And the fix in either case could be easy or really difficult, right? And that's where we're going to have to come down to some risk decisions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
It's hard to predict the amount of time it will take to fix, right?
Yep.
But what I think that DevOps and specifically Agile does is make sure that vulnerability and or exposure is not reintroduced, which is a capability I don't think we really had until we had that process.
Agreed. So before we move on to your story number 3.
Stinky cheese?
Stinky cheese. I'd like to hit your story number 10. And the fact that
number 10, okay.
And the fact that Tim Medine thinks that the bands at Ipanema are fantastic, which I have to agree with him.
Interesting.
Number 10, printers. The
Is that like the girl from Ipanema? That's a song.
It is. The bands at Ipanema at the Orchard Towers are amazing. Yeah, just ask Tim Medine.
So printers.
Printers, the overlooked security threat in your enterprise.
I've got a long, so just a backstory.
And I want you to diatribe on that, and I want to add to that diatribe.
Okay. So CSO Online produced a podcast largely with tech journalists, nothing against them. And in fact, their comments were pretty good. I kind of skipped through the podcast, video podcast. You should go watch it for yourself.
And I want to say printers, embedded devices, aka IoT.
Sure. CSO Online published this article, Printers, the Overlooked Security Threat in Your Enterprise. Now, I don't disagree that the threat posed by printers and associated vulnerabilities are an overlooked portion of your IT security threat modeling, right? Overlooked for sure. But in my opinion, hackers, or I should say attackers, don't need to break into your printer to be effective. Largely, we've observed attackers using other methods to obtain your data and move laterally within your organization, not relying on printer attacks to accomplish their goals. What I've observed in the past 8 months or so, right, is that largely email phishing, lateral movement with domain credentials wins almost every time.
Absolutely.
I mean, Larry and Job, you certainly attest to this, right? When we force attackers to step outside of this because we put protections in email phishing, we put protections in your domain or your directory services, attackers may turn to printers. But what I've observed over the past 20 years or so, looking at embedded systems vulnerabilities, IoT vulnerabilities, and very specifically vulnerabilities in printers, is that it's an opportunistic attack that attackers don't really need to leverage, because if I can gain a foothold from an email phishing attack and I can abuse credentials to move laterally, I don't need to dwell on your printer and wait for something to print something sensitive or...
And oftentimes, getting access to a printer already assumes you have access to the network.
True. Yes, right. If I have access to the network, I'm going to move laterally in the domain based on credential spraying and other attacks within the domain. I don't need to leverage a printer.
Yep. Joff.
Yeah, so I wanted to, Larry was just touching on it. I wanted to reinforce that comment. You've got to gain some sort of access to the printer through some mechanism that's either physical or still involving phishing some human, right? If we make the assumption that that most environments have still got some level of firewalling around them, and you still have to go sort of inside to out as an attack methodology, the printer is a tougher gig because it may be extraordinarily vulnerable, but getting that first foothold can usually be a little bit more challenging unless you've got physical access to the facility. Now, if you've got some physical access and you have some common exploits up your sleeve, then planting something on a printer is going to be relatively easy. And moving from there.
Jeff, I would argue if I were the attacker, right, and someone were holding a gun to my head and said, you got to maintain access into this environment and steal all their intellectual property, I still would not go towards the printer. If I'm going to attack an embedded system to collect intellectual property, maintain persistence, I'm still going to go after the firmware subsystems in modern PCs and servers, not so much the printer, right? I'm going to attack a workstation or a server. I'm going to get into one of their firmware subsystems, much like Eclipsium has advocated for and provides protections against, right? I'm going to get into one of those subsystems. I'm going to persist on a physical computer to move laterally, not persist on a printer where someone may at some point print something that's sensitive, or use that. We always say use that device to then compromise it as a stepping stone to compromise another device. To me, it's still too limiting in that capacity, depending on the platform. I want to get into an Intel PC that's got a firmware that puts me in the UEFI BIOS that I can always reinfect, and that's where I'm going to go. Again, gun to my head, nation state. That has me hacking into. And again, I'm going
to let Joff go because I'm kind of leading you into this argument because I have this counter argument that I want to present.
Yeah. So I think you're right, because a printer most of the time is a relatively passive device, right? It's waiting for a connection.
Yes.
From either a print spool system or directly from a workstation to print some sort of sensitive data. So if you're going to stick a C2 channel on a printer, you are going to literally sit there and wait till something interesting happens.
Yep.
for the most part, unless you're lucky enough to have enough functionality in the operating system, and some of the very high-end printers pretty much
True.
are workstations. Unless you've got enough high-end functionality in the system to actually explore around from that device. And so I think you're basically on the right track, because you're going to be much for most of the dumbed down printers anyway. You're going to be in a much more passive position if you use that as your foothold.
And let's be honest, a few years ago there was research that totally, depending on the model, lets me sit on that printer and basically scan whatever's going through it, right? But again, it's opportunistic. I got to sit there for some time. Also,
it doesn't mean it's not valuable. I mean,
no, it's true. You can get lucky, right? That's my other point, John. I mean, I've been on pen test, probably 12 years ago, where I was just lucky, right? Yep. Like, I broke into the printer. It happened to store a document that had sensitive information. Yep. Sure, I got lucky for a very small subset of that data. Mm-hmm. If the organization has not locked that down, likely I can move laterally inside the domain much more quickly and get even more sensitive information and not have to dwell on the printers.
Yep. All right, so let me drop some crazy bombs on you. Thinking about that printer, and I heard lots of things mentioned that were great about, in a moderate printer, you can have some persistence, and that's relatively easy to do, and you can potentially use that to move laterally. Great, let's go with that. You got to get there first.
Yep.
And my thoughts on this are, if you take that moderately low-end printer in an environment, I'd argue that many of them are still configured with Wi-Fi. And many of them are still configured by default to have ad hoc wireless networking turned on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Without any security. Meaning you can have a vendor walk into your office and say, hey, I need to print out a couple of marketing slicks. Can you print these out for me? And the administrative assistant says, oh, go connect to this printer right over here, and you can print them out yourselves, and we'll grab them for you. Type of thing. That's the type of functionality that I envision. Mm-hmm. The problem is that really doesn't happen anymore. The problem is that in many cases, some of these older printers, and still relatively modern printers, still have ad hoc Wi-Fi networking turned on by default.
Mm-hmm.
Folks don't turn it off. So now, as an attacker, I go in the environment. I don't have physical access, but I have near physical proximity. I can access the ad hoc wireless network without a password, and I'm on the same subnet as a printer. And maybe I can exploit that printer. I can send password guessing attacks against that printer, because who's fucking looking at the logs for who guess bad passwords?
Even collecting the logs.
Or collecting the logs. Or if they haven't turned off ad hoc wireless networking, have they changed the default password?
But the thing is, let me go down this. And if they've done any of those type of things, I have access to the internal environment through Wi-Fi, through an ad hoc wireless network. And I didn't need to send a single phishing email. I didn't need to compromise a single user account. I potentially have access to the environment from the printer. This is things that we've been talking about for a really long time. Sure. But here's the thing. Your email phishing attacks, largely successful. Mm-hmm. Your password spraying attacks, largely successful. Do you need to attack the printer? If you get domain admin, you can just go after the sensitive information directly. You don't need to dwell and do all that printer hacking. But that's my only point.
But the problem is that I didn't necessarily need to dwell to do printer hacking.
You could trigger. You're right. You could trigger an event. Yes.
I don't need to trigger an event. I go in there and I see, oh, hey, HP setup. I connect to HP setup. I'm on the same subnet as the printer. I connect to the printer. HP setup is still enabled. Default password. I have full access to the printer itself. I can upload exploits. I now have entry into the network as a whole.
Right, but you can't phish the printer. You got to phish.
I don't need to phish the printer. I now have a host inside the environment which I can.
Do you need physical access to get to that printer?
No, it's Wi-Fi.
You need physical access in proximity.
Proximity, yeah, but within a couple of city blocks, depending on your Wi-Fi hardware.
Sure. But I think that's what differentiates every attacker on the internet versus every.
Absolutely.
That's my only point.
Absolutely.
I think when attackers are forced to go there, they will.
Yep.
Today, majority of organizations.
I'd argue not today. In history, I think there's much easier paths, but it is still a path. And I would say that from that perspective of the overlooked, my attack path for something like that may consider, because I do a lot of Wi-Fi stuff, that may be something that I wouldn't overlook.
The enterprise overlooks it.
Yes,
attackers don't.
I would not.
Yeah, I think that's a scary part of where we're at with,
and I think
security today. Right, is that if you do lock down the email phishing aspect of it, what haven't you looked at? Printers are pretty in that light. Printers are kind of high up on the list of things that enterprises overlook.
You think about the evolution.
Attackers are going to gravitate towards the overlooked things.
You think about the evolution is that, oh shit, people are browsing to websites and they're getting viruses, desktop antivirus, and now they've got more sophisticated stuff. So we've got to have better host protections, and now we need to have email filtering gateways and web filtering gateways, and we've evolved many of those, and I think we haven't focused a lot on the formerly embedded devices, IoT, in your environment.
The IoT devices that are in every enterprise, which is the printer.
Yep.
Yeah. True.
Okay. Number 3. Speaking of viruses, right?
Weird Al Yankovic did a video about viruses. Now, you got to go watch the video. It's a link in the show notes, wiki.securityweekly.com. It's a warning about viruses from Weird Al, which at first I read as Weird AI, but turns out it's Weird Al, and literally has a song about viruses. And the way that Weird Al would name his email phishing campaign is with the subject stinky cheese. It's throwing that out there. Entertainment value is off the charts. My only comment was, thanks, Weird Al, for burning my best email phishing campaign. Subject of stinky cheese.
I'm going to have to go to fish in the microwave now.
Oh, my God.
Joff, you got one?
It's muted. Oh, there we go. Have I got one? I think I had a story on there. You're looking for me to give you a story?
Who's reading your SMS texts?
Yeah, that was kind of fun, right? I mean, it was just like, who's reading your SMS text? And so...
Tell us, Joff, who's reading your SMS?
That was a FireEye blog research that talked about APT41, a Chinese APT group, that is designed to monitor and save SMS traffic from specific phone numbers, IMSI numbers, and keywords for subsequent theft.
Specifically deployed in telecommunication networks.
Exactly.
Oof.
Right? So these things are getting smart, is the take-home here. This one was discovered during a 2019 investigation at a telecom provider within a cluster of Linux servers. They operated as SMS servers. In the mobile networks, the SMS servers are responsible for routing the messages, as you might imagine, and storing them until the recipient has come back online. And anyway, long story short, this malware is a data miner that's loaded by an installation script, and it checks for the existence of a couple of files and then reads config files every 30 seconds or so, and it actually reads and decodes the contents of SMSs, and it's looking for very particular sources and destinations, and it's nasty. It is just nasty.
This ties into email phishing, and one of the things that I've always speculated on in the past year or so is that what happens when attackers move on from email phishing, and we've already seen some of this, move on to other forms of phishing. There's lots of ways I can present a link to a user, right? There's SMS. There's Slack. There's, what is the open source one? meeting something.
Yeah, that one.
That one, right? There's corporate messaging, right? From Microsoft and others, right? There's lots of ways.
There's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's gonna slide into your DMs.
And we were talk a lot about email phishing lately, and one of the things that's interesting is that in targeted email phishing attacks, one of the scenarios, there's lots of scenarios, of course, but one of the scenarios is your CEO, as an example, is requesting something of an employee. And today, largely that happens over email, right? Someone basically spoofs an email from the CEO, requests that another employee take some action that could benefit the attacker, right? Kevin from Great Horn talks about the use case that he saw recently where there was a financial institution. It's a $3 million wire transfer.
Yep.
Not insignificant, right? It went through the process, and the only reason the organization basically discovered that it was a phish was because at some point in the transfer process, they had to send a fax. And there was some issue with the fax, and that delayed the process such that one of the employees was like, what's going on with this? Like, this transaction's been sticking around for a while or whatever. We're not getting the fax. And someone looked at the email and went, is this really legitimate? And they caught it. But it was close enough where Kevin's like, they did some research and they came to us, and we were going to help them with targeted email phishing attacks, which Great Horn's a sponsor. In my opinion, I think they do a really good job, sponsorship aside, right? And adopted their technology to prevent this from happening in the future.
And I will state that this is not the first time we have heard of this either.
Right,
and
Larry Choff, you guys go through this all the time.
Yeah,
right.
It's a technology problem that targets a non-technology procedural-based problem.
Exactly. If your procedure includes, like in this organization's example, some kind of fax or other scrutiny from when you're transferring an amount,
requires multiple authentication.
Hopefully you catch it, but like a lot of times it's not caught. If you talk to pen testers, I was talking to one of the core security folks today, and they're like, "Yeah," I told them that story, and they're like, "Great." A lot of times that's not caught. Like that $3 million is gone. Now, what you have to understand about wire transfers, it's gone.
Yep.
It's done. It's done. That $3 million is gone, right? And that's really telling. But what happens when we flip from email to other things? This could, again, a double-edged sword, could work to our advantage. I get an email, let's say, from the CEO that says, hey, and the attack that everyone talks about is end of the quarter, I'm phishing sales to go, my transfer didn't go through, you need to push this payment through. It's the end of the quarter. Sales is motivated to get the sales. They're pushing this stuff through. What if that checks and balances in your process, to your point, Larry, isn't coming through email that says, hey, when I need to get basically authentication or blessing for a wire transfer, I got to get a message on Slack, or I got to get a text message, right?
Or someone needs to visit me in person.
I need to get a phone call, a little dicey. You can impersonate. In large companies, you could impersonate the CEO, right? There's some other step that validates that, that's outside of email, maybe even outside of a phone call. So this is where I see phishing going to, when email and maybe phone calls is only part of the process, or maybe not part of the process at all, that if I'm going to transfer $3 million, I need to receive some other communications from maybe not one, but multiple people in the organization before I do that. Attackers are going to start gravitating towards that. That's my concern.
Yep. They already have.
In certain circumstances, agreed.
Yep.
Right? Attackers are going to try and understand your processes. I think it's your processes that have to be resilient to verification. And what's interesting, and it was really, I think Jason Lang from Trusted Sec? Jason from Trusted Sec, was talking about those users that really challenge them, and I'm sure you and Joff have encountered this when you're in a phishing campaign. Certain users will just, and Chris Hadnacki did this too, right? You run up into those users that are like, I don't believe, they start the conversation with, I don't believe anything you're saying. And to me, that's not trust but verify. That's verify and then trust.
Yeah.
And I think that's a process change we're going to have to go through because of the technology that makes it easier for attackers to execute these attacks. The mindset in your organization needs to be verify and then trust. And if you just don't teach your users to look at email headers and be security forensic specialists to spot a phishing attack.
You can't.
Teach them to verify and then trust.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to catch 100% of everything all the time. We agreed upon that a long time ago on the show, right? But you're going to catch a whole bunch of shit.
And for the stuff you can't catch, you have a process to deal with the stuff you can't catch.
Right. And
Like, or everything looks, the best I can tell, everything looks legit for this financial transfer, for this technical thing, for the email. But in order for me to do this, I need to go
verify.
I need to go call the CEO.
Yes,
I need to go
to
call the CFO.
That's what I tell people that receive calls or emails. I'm like, I can teach you a lot of things technically about how to verify that, but not everyone's going to progress to the level of being a friggin' security analyst, right?
Yep.
You shouldn't have to be. What I want to teach you is how to verify and then trust. If you receive an inbound communication, sure, take that.
Yeah.
I am being, the recent one I saw was, I'm being subpoenaed. Okay, cool. All right. Just don't respond to that.
Mm-hmm.
Go verify that first.
Yep.
And then trust it. Don't implicitly trust inbound communications. If you just flip that one bit, right?
Yep.
You can catch a lot of the attack. Not all.
Your social security has been your social security number has been compromised. You need to call our number so that you don't go to jail.
It's something that I think as us as security professionals, we've always realized because we've executed and seen a lot of the attacks. So when we receive an inbound communication, we're like, yeah.
Nice try.
I'm going to go initiate an outbound communication to whoever it is, and I'm going to verify.
Via a separate channel,
and I'm going to verify. When my credit card company says, yeah, I need to verify this transaction, and as part of that, I need your credit card number. Even 15 years ago, we started the show, we were like advising people, not a good idea.
Yep.
Hang up the phone, go call your credit card company and say, hey, what's going on with my account, right?
Yep.
Flip the tables.
Yep. Hey, I just got a call that said they needed to verify a transaction. Oh, yeah, sir, I see that we need to verify a transaction. Great.
Totally legit. The awareness just needs to flip that, and you catch such a large percentage of attacks by just doing that, right? That's where I really think it's at.
Yep. And no, don't call them back on the number they give you. Call them back on the number.
Go look on the, like I always said that, right? Like I said, even 15 years ago, flip your credit card over.
Go grab the last bill you got.
Go call that number.
Look it up on the internet, for God's sake.
Yeah, then go verify that.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Joff, still there.
Joff, is that an effective way? Is that an effective way to basically thwart most attackers?
Is what an effective way?
Like flipping the tables on them. Basically, you receive an inbound communication. Okay, fine. I'm going to take wherever that was destined for, whatever that's related to. I'm going to initiate an outbound communication. I'm going to call my state. I'm going to call my attorney. I'm going to call my credit card company and go, hey, like what's going on with is there anything going on with my account? Do I need to do anything, right? Flip the tables.
Yeah. No, I think flipping the tables is actually an interesting strategy, right? I mean, because it's a surprise, right? It's going to put somebody on the back foot, and they're not expecting it.
Yep. For a recent physical assessment that I know our guys did, flip the tables. One of our guys showed up, had a fake badge, looked official, said, hey, I'm here for a surprise PCI audit. Who's going to give me a tour of the facility? And the admin assistant called someone, and that person said, oh, you're here for a surprise PCI audit. Hold on a minute. And they went and made some phone calls up the chain and said, yeah, sorry, we don't know of anybody that's conducting any surprise PCI audits. We're sorry. We're not going to give you access to the facility.
Right.
Like, Yes.
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 I mean, it's basically OPSEC, right?
Yep.
That we've just putting that into your processes,
Yep.
I think really helps.
Yep. Not
Yeah.
what's not trust but verify but trust.
Now, totally
go.
unrelated is Amazon's Ring doorbell.
And then the other with the Amazon Ring doorbell, and then the other one that made the national news I thought was interesting about the shooting laser beams to simulate voice.
And like I said in Hack Thinking News, I was totally hoping the laser beams could shrink someone like Ant-Man, and Ant-Man could get into your Apple and Siri and Google devices, but it wasn't that, right?
It's close enough.
Close enough.
Close enough. But this one.
I want to talk about that one,
Yeah.
but first I want to talk about Amazon's Ring doorbell because I really like Security Affairs as a news source. I think with this story they did themselves and the community a disservice because make sure you, again, it goes back to verify and then trust.
Mm-hmm.
The article title said, Amazon Ring video doorbell could open the door of your home to attackers. That makes you think that an attacker can break into your stuff digitally, wirelessly, remotely, and unlock your door.
Yep.
Could be the case, highly unlikely from what I've gathered from this article. So the controversial title to me, I think is irresponsible, is how I labeled it. And again, I'm shocked by this site because Security Affairs, I think, does a good job in reporting, other than this time when I came across this article. Now, first, you would have to have a smart lock on your front door and not use any other type of lock as a backup. So let's just play the scenario out in the very beginning.
Yep.
If I have a smart lock on my door, which I do in my home in many scenarios, in addition to my smart lock, I have an analog backup, deadbolt, right? And the deadbolt, what I like about deadbolts, and you talk to Deviant and others in lock picking, right, is it's a key on either side of the deadbolt.
Or could be a key on it.
Could be a key on the other side. Before I go to bed, I want to go put a key in the inside of my lock and lock it, right? That's the most secure scenario. Others maybe have a knob you turn to turn the deadbolt.
Sure.
No electronics in that lock, right? Your electronics are in your deadbolt, right? So if I'm home, maybe I go inside of my door and I lock the lock. Maybe I go put a key in. If I'm really paranoid, I put a key in and I turn the lock. Maybe on the inside of my door, maybe on the outside of my door, I've got a maybe biometric fingerprint. I've done that on my man room. I have a fingerprint lock. It's a horrible lock. Just throwing it out there. Like, you could cut that with bolt cutters with no, but it's more to protect that insider threat of my kids and family, contractors or whatever, gaining access to the electronics maybe that exist in my man room without my permission, right? So locks aside, I think you need to have a backup if you have a smart lock.
Yep.
Even if that's an analog thing like the chain, or like in a hotel room where you can physically...
Some other, at least minor barrier to entry.
Minor barrier to entry. That doesn't protect you when you're not home, right?
Right.
But it does protect you when you're home, when your family is there, which I think the stakes are higher, in my opinion, right? We could debate home security till the cows come home. But in any case, those are the scenarios, right? All right. So if you got smart locks, I think you also need to have cameras in your home, right? Knowing that there is a digital threat to your home.
I'd argue if you have smart locks, you have cameras.
Right? If you're a nerd and you've got smart locks, to Larry's point, that you can control with your smartphone, you probably have some cameras too. I think that's a good backup because you're going to get a potential attacker coming in, towards your home on your property. If you also, Larry and I have talked about this in the past, right? You've got a camera inside your home that's pointed at the door, right? That can catch people coming in through the door. Now, all right, granted, if someone were to gain access to your home, get the Wi-Fi password, they could potentially wipe the footage. There's still an authentication piece they need to go through potentially to do that. All right, that aside.
And I think this is where your attack is coming into play here.
Yeah. So the vulnerability with this, the Amazon Ring doorbell is if I am in proximity and your doorbell has this vulnerability, I can get your Wi-Fi password.
Only through significant number of deauths, meaning the doorbell will not connect to the doorbell and or lock will not connect to your Wi-Fi network.
Yeah, so like at this point, I was writing this up, and I'm like, "Holy crap! How did we get here?"
Yeah,
Right? Like, there's a lot of steps to get here.
Oh,
like
shit.
physical security in your home.
Like, oh shit! You notice in the app the shit's disconnected, so you go and you try
Right.
to reconnect it.
Yeah.
And when you reconnect it, they capture the reconnection, which means they can recover the key to your network.
Yeah. So what they're basically what this hack
This is typical and if you ask me, this is typical Wi-Fi security.
I got to reset my doorbell to factory defaults, reconfigure it. In that reconfiguration process,
Capture the four-way handshake.
it sends the Wi-Fi password in clear text.
Oh.
And I can capture that. But I got to force you to reconfigure your doorbell to do that. The suggestion is to force the user to reconfigure their doorbell. I send DAuth attacks, tells the user my doorbell's malfunctioning, therefore I need to reconfigure it. I mean, this is like complete, utter bullshit in my opinion.
Well, because of course, you have to note that you're doing the DAuth attacks to drop them off the network, and you have to know when they're going to reconfigure it to stop the DAuth attacks, or it will never reconnect. It becomes timing based.
It's so many issues with this attack that I don't even consider it an attack, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But again, like how do we get here and all these? Again, I can just open up a goddamn window. I can throw a rock through the window, right? Like there's a million ways you can break into someone's home, independent of all these smart devices. Which again, my recommendation, I like to have the cameras.
Yep. But
and again, Joff, like local cameras versus cloud cameras, we can debate that.
Mm-hmm.
I think cameras in any capacity help you secure your home. Sure. Open you up to some attacks, maybe some privacy issues. I get those, totally buying into that whole thing. But this whole article just grinds my gears.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Yeah, the nice thing about cameras is they have good deterrent value, actually. And it almost doesn't matter, the fact that they're there, the fact that the knowledge of them is there. A lot of people just stick a sticker on their window just for that basis, right?
Or have fake cameras.
My mailbox is on the end of my driveway, right at the street.
Yep.
And I've got a big sign that's like, I'm monitoring you with video surveillance. And what's interesting is the like social ways that changes behavior, where like my neighbor next door, and thankfully I have great neighbors in the close vicinity of my home. Then my neighbor will say to me, she'll be like, I ran across your yard in my pajamas to get my dog, and I know you have cameras, and I'm like, I'm not even looking at the footage, like legit, like whatever, like that's fine. Like,
but in the back of your mind, you're going like, oh shit, I get to see her in pajamas,
right? And it's just kind of like a funny moment to like see your name. It's like, whatever. I'm not. What
kind of pajamas?
That's not the case, right? But like with Ring, the security benefits are if suspicious people are visiting people in your proximity, they'll send you alerts and be like, hey, your neighbors are flagging this as like suspicious activity. Like you should be on high alert.
Yep.
So you call your significant other and say, or your significant other, like my wife has access to the Ring. So she'll see that alert and be on more high alert. Maybe call the police if someone comes to the door that they don't recognize, because, hey, there's like suspicious stuff going on, and the police know about, despite what you think, know about this technology. There's suspicious people running around a neighborhood. Could you like come by and investigate?
The other one too, to your point, you could go to all these technological attacks to unlock your smart lock, or you could throw a brick through a window next to your door and bypass a smart lock.
Sure.
But if you got cameras, you've got some record of it. You may not have the best record of it, but you know that somebody's there and you can respond appropriately. You can call the police, or you can have your alarm system call the police automatically, and so forth and so on, in the whole smart home mentality. I know of a gentleman that was burglarized, and they went through a side window. which wasn't covered by the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, while they were burglarizing the place, they shuffled everything out through the front door.
Which was caught on camera.
Which was caught on camera. And then they looked directly at the camera and went like, oh, shit. And grabbed the camera off the front door entrance and ripped it and then chucked it. But because it was, if it had been local, they could have been like, oh, shit, where's the recorder? And trashed the recorder. But it was all cloud-based.
Right.
So no matter what they had done, the video was done.
So now, not only are they charged with burglary in some capacity, right? And again, I'm not a lawyer, but I know because of my neighborhood and neighbors that have done things, if you destroy a neighbor's property, that's a misdemeanor vandalism charge that they're also charged with because they destroyed my camera, right? So they're just adding on charges at that point, which is, again, this is kind of like also a double-edged sword, right? Like, if everyone has these cameras, now in my neighborhood, if a dog poops and someone doesn't pick it up, there's a post to the neighborhood group that someone has done that. So like I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about all this surveillance technology that happens, but I don't know. At the end of the day, it also makes you be a good citizen, right? And catches bad people. At the other end of the spectrum, it could invade on people's privacy. So I get both sides of the argument. But going back to the story, I think this hack is complete bullshit. And the thing that I think will seal the deal, on my opinion, and you can disagree with me, and that's totally fine, is Ring has a track record of when they have a vulnerability, which this is not the first exactly the same type of vulnerability that Ring has had. They push a firmware update that remediates this vulnerability.
Done. Yep. The other one that goes along with this is I don't have a link in the show notes. The one that made national news about you can spoof voice to your assistant, your voice assistant. So like you can take a laser and you can point it at specific areas of your.
It's totally. Oh, first of all, totally fascinating. That sound and light are energy, and the EMF. Thank you. Or
electromagnetic frequency.
Yes, EMF microphones on your devices will interpret sound and light as energy. The research, the amazing thing that I appreciate about this article, this story is. The researchers figured out, and the exact science is, even still, I don't think fully understand it, that they can, from light, recreate sound to emulate voice commands is amazing. Secondly, Sean from Privacy Safe came on Hack Naked News this week. And you should totally check this out. And Sean was like, we have issues, going back to Wes Widner's interview on this show when he presented at Hacker Halted, about authentication and authorization of voice technology. Sean had a really great epiphany. He said, look, what if we could turn the tables on this and use this for defense? What if before the system processed a voice command, we had a laser pointer that entered a password through light that said, I'm an authorized user, and then accepted voice commands? I was like, Sean, spot on to, bravo. That's
that becomes a question of, I have to be in close physical proximity. I need to be the way I use.
I have to be able to shine a light on the device. Agreed. It's a balance between security and usability. Totally agree.
My Echo, we use it in the house in general, but at bedtime, in the bed, dark room. Echoes over here on the nightstand. We're in bed, and we, ask question of the day and ask the weather for tomorrow, so we know what to dress like. And for me to shine something like that.
Those of us on the show and those listening, especially younger kids, Halloween time, they're scared. They want to have lights on, right? And you and the folks in your home, they use the voice commands to turn the lights on so they feel safer, right? Then having to shine a light on the device to do that could be impede on that. Agreed.
Yep. Yeah. So, but great idea for
cool idea.
Maybe even for specific commands would work for something like that. The big one that really really ground my gears was national news stated that, all of your personal assistants are vulnerable. Yeah. Somebody has to be able to shine a laser on your personal assistant, and any dude or any hacker in their basement with a disposable $1,000 could do this. I'm like, I think about that disposable $1,000, and I don't know many people that have a disposable $1,000.
Sure, agreed. But let's say you do. What if I place my devices and or put a mirror or some kind of obstruction around it that allows sound but not light?
Yeah.
Right?
Hell, like the stuff that they demonstrated was, you could be on the top floor, but your personal assistant is near the window, so you could shine it down. Like, mine is 25 feet away from any window. And to get the right angle for something like that, you're in my backyard.
What I said about on Agent N, right, is I think the defense against this is the placement of your smart devices, right? Not placing them near windows for a lot of reasons, right? You don't want people on the outside to be able to emit sound or light to affect or send commands to your voice assistants. Right?
I think about my most vulnerable voice assistant, which is on the nightstand in our bedroom. And it is near a window. It is 6 feet from a window, which means somebody at a higher elevation could, in fact, send commands to that.
What if they fly a drone, Larry, with a laser?
You would have to fly a drone, which...
why would you go through that?
From my neighbor's yard, who is 85 years old, isn't going to fly a drone. Or the only other things that are in that area is one tree and sky. Like they would. It would be nation state based attack.
Yes,
and it would be my own nation
against my home,
and it would be my own nation at that point
to send commands to my voice assistant.
Then if they do that at 2:00 in the morning, my Echo is going to go, "We're sorry, you can't do that."
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly,
what the?
right.
What? Why is the Echo talking? I didn't say anything. Was I sleepwalking? What?
Or they're going to just wait until the home is empty and open up a window that's unlocked, right? There's so many...
Yep. I mean, admittedly, it's kind of terrifying. One, it exposes that technology to billions of people that saw that in the news and like, oh, shit, that's a real thing. Like, welcome to cyberpunk, man. But...
Agreed.
What's the real threat?
Yeah.
Throw a rock through a window.
Two more stories quick. Bill Gates says that people would be using Windows Mobile if not for the Microsoft antitrust case. And again, I thought this was like a sensational headline, but then the quote from Bill Gates is... okay, so the quote from Bill Gates is, "There's no doubt the antitrust lawsuit was bad for Microsoft." I agree. I agree. 20 years ago or so, it was bad for technology in general, right, at that time. But he goes on to say, and we would have been more focused on creating the phone operating system. And so instead of using an Android today, you would be using Windows Mobile if it had not been for the antitrust case. What Bill Gates is saying is we all use Android today and not Windows Mobile because of the antitrust case. Arguably, I could go either way on this, but I'm going on the side of...
That said, that's a good thing. I mean...
Windows Mobile was horrible. We were talking about that before the show today.
I might argue that Android is also horrible, but...
Now, my comment
diversity.
is someone should send Bill Gates a copy of Extreme Ownership by Jocko, right, which says if you own the organization...
Joffa's laughing.
Joffa's laughing, right? You're in control of the organization. But I also get that, lawsuits and other things can affect the, communications and direction of the company as well. Bill and Melinda do a lot of great things for charity with all of their money. And I don't want to downplay that in any capacity, right? And he goes on to say in the article, we're missing, $50 or $100 billion from our revenue stream, which, again, not far off in terms of numbers, right? But, again, also not really grounded in reality. Like, take ownership and And you could read this and interpret that he is taking ownership and saying, it's my fault. I was distracted because of the antitrust lawsuit, and therefore I didn't push this mobile technology and be a leader in the space. And again, largely because Bill and Melinda do great things for charity, and Microsoft today is a completely different company. I can sympathize with that. On the flip side, though, it kind of feels like a cop-out. Like Windows Mobile failed because of this external government pressure. That kind of feels like a cop-out.
That said, if Windows Mobile had succeeded, would the antitrust been any weaker?
True. Would Android
pure speculation?
But would Android, iOS, or Windows Mobile been any better or weaker in terms of security had there been a third player in the market? Who knows?
Welcome to the Twilight Zone.
Anyway,
in a reality where things are not as they as they seem, right?
My WTF story of this week. WTF. There was a lot. Our internal Slack channel got the other ones we weren't covering, which were hilarious in their own right on this show.
Joff, I'd love you to comment on
teachable moment.
Paul's WTF story number one
for all of our friends and family.
Let's let Joff comment.
Oh, Joff, do you have a comment on the Windows Mobile story
or the WTF number one?
Well, okay. Windows Mobile is interesting for a millisecond.
You can steam. I mean, you can say steaming pile of shit. That's okay.
Yeah, I mean,
it was horrible.
I don't buy it. I saw what Microsoft was trying to do long term, but this is one of those cases where the open marketplace idea won out predominantly, and Apple lost a lot to that too, honestly. I mean, Google.
Yeah, it's kind of like movies with time travel, right? How they affect time. This story really kind of reminds me of that, Joff, and we could speculate all day long. However, I think that in the timeline we're in now, right, Microsoft learned that openness is a better business model. And if you look at what they've been doing with Azure and embracing openness with Linux, is a much better thing for all of us in technology and security than it would be for them to control a mobile operating system.
I completely agree. And I think actually we ended up in a better place as a result.
I agree.
Of the history playing it out. Right. Now, with
this is an end game where we can change the timeline and whatever. Yeah.
With regard to the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot story, all I can say is, what is wrong with people?
Well, right? That was my take on it, Job. I completely agree. People are posting their genitals on Reddit to get an STD or STI diagnosis.
Go see a damn doctor and keep it in
But they have virtual doctors now.
But that costs money, but Reddit is free. That's what the article said, Larry. That's not me. That's what the article said.
Welcome to healthcare in America. Wait, what?
Yeah.
Let's not get political, but
right. Yeah. Well, political or
because it's easier to, no matter where you are, it's easier to post pictures of your junk to Reddit than it is to go to a virtual doctor.
Let me just.
I'm really reminded. Speaking, so we talked about video games and arcade games. Do you remember Leisure Suit Larry?
Oh, hell yeah!
And
which version? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
First one.
Yes.
Is when if you in Leisure Suit Larry, your goal, and this would never fly today as a video game, right? But your goal in Leisure Suit Larry was to sleep with women as a guy. And
it was
in the first revision, if you slept with the prostitute in that game, your junk turned green.
Yep.
So, what are people doing? My junk's green. Rather than going to the doctor, let me take a picture of it and put it on Reddit.
You know what I totally want to do? I want to go to these Reddit forums, and I want to post pictures of screen caps of Leisure Suit Larry with my junk green.
And the quote from this article blows me away. Social media was not built to deliver health care. Shit, Sherlock, says UC San Diego scientist and study co-author Alicia Nobles. She could be very smart. I don't want to take anything away from Alicia, but like, hello, the fact that poor Alicia has to say this to the public on CNBC, like, come on, people. Like,
but I'd argue
go to the doctor.
But no, I'd argue that social media is equipped to deal with this, given that now you can actually do virtual appointments with a doctor.
And again, that costs money. The article says that. Yes,
I don't care.
We've seen that. We've seen that.
It's still a social media platform, paid for or not, that you can send pictures of your junk to a doctor, a qualified doctor.
There are more. Reddit does not. But Reddit is not posting it to qualify. You're rolling the dice. Most of the people seeing it are not qualified doctors. There are services that you can pay money to, where you can consult with an actual doctor.
Where you can pay money to send your pictures of junk to a qualified doctor.
Correct.
And I've got really one comment that I got to close on this, and that is just this: 99.9% of the stuff you read on the internet is complete garbage. And so, if you think out of the 99.9% garbage that's out there, that you're going to get a really good opinion on your itchy junk, then you really, really have a problem. I'm just saying.
Go to
a real problem. Go to the damn doctor.
With that,
that will conclude the show. Thank you, everyone, for listening, watching this edition of Pulse Security Weekly. Larry, take us out.
Oh, it's your junk with a screwdriver. Over and out.